Good afternoon. Welcome to this presentation about continuous and authentic assessment in the new normal. My name is Antonella Giacosa. I'm an English teacher. I teach English as a foreign language in Italy, and I'm currently doing my PhD research in digital humanities. Today I'm going to present an ongoing study, so results are provisional. Anyway, first, we're going to see together some background information, some information about the context of study. Then I'm going to present methodology, research questions, and I'm going to provide some theoretical concepts. And finally, we're going to see together my main findings so far. This presentation deals with continuous and authentic assessment in English linguistics courses, both BA and MA level, in Italian universities. Actually, it is based on two different collections of data. The first one was carried out in the spring 2020 when the COVID-19 emergency forced the whole education system to transition suddenly online. It is called emergency remote education. And then there is a second part, which is based on collection of data carried out in the autumn 2020, which we can be referred to as the new normal. The research questions I'm going to try to answer in this presentation are first, so is traditional assessment still adequate and relevant in the new normal? And second, can continuous and authentic assessment respond more effectively to the challenges of the new generations of students? My goal, even if provisional, is to provide an evidence-based alternative approach to traditional evaluation to respond to the compelling challenges of the new normal. As regards the methodology I adopted, let me say that this presentation is based on data collected in two different studies. The first study was a pilot study I carried out between March and June 2020, and it refers to emergency remote education. I was interested in the main changes the education system had to face, and more specifically university. So I involved 14 Italian universities, 24 lecturers and more than 800 students. Then I identified the issues of concern, and I decided to focus on assessment. So, in the so-called new normal, that is the autumn term, which started in October here in Italy, I decided to concentrate on continuous and authentic assessment as a possible alternative to traditional assessment, which could prove to be an effective tool for online classes in emergencies, in the new normal, but it could be a useful tool also for assessment at higher education level for in-person classes, so under normal circumstances. So, for both studies, I participated in some lessons, so you can see here there is a direct observation. So students could see me, and I had the possibility to explain the goals of my studies. Then, during emergency remote education, I sent both students and lecturers participating in the study an online questionnaire. There was a questionnaire for students and a questionnaire for lecturers. There I was investigating more the issues of concern referring to emergency remote education in general. Thanks to these outcomes, I identified assessment as a problem. And so, talking with lecturers, we decided to experiment continuous assessment, which is not a very common mainstream here in Italy at university level. So I observed some lessons in the second term just in my university, and I just involved, as I have already said, two lecturers and their students. And I sent both the lecturers and the students a questionnaire concerning, more specifically, continuous and authentic assessment. So I carried out a quantitative and qualitative analysis. Quantitative analysis is based on the open-ended questions and answers, of course, whereas qualitative analysis is based on their open comments, made by both lecturers and students. Let me go on with the introduction to the study, talking about some theoretical concepts. So, emergency remote education is a branch of distance learning which deals with the unplanned educational response to a crisis. This term has been used to refer to the spring 2020, when the education system migrated suddenly online. Lecturers, teachers provided online classes, live and recorded, video lessons, and they were forced to assess their students online. It can be considered distance education because distance education is an option which relies on planning, theoretical and practical knowledge and consolidated models, whereas ERE is a necessity change to respond to an emergency. It is a new field of research because in the past, emergency education was referring mainly to the places where natural catastrophes happened, or in the aftermath of a war, and so it was something referring and happening just in one place. Whereas what we experienced in the spring 2020 was unprecedented and global. There were no safe places, and it caused major changes also because it was sudden. So this is a new field we have to look into to find maybe also some suggestions to cope better with the emergency, but also to improve our system of education. Because thanks during ERE, some dynamics could be identified, which could give us, provide us with a deeper insight into some issues of concern of online education and of education. Assessment, for example, is one of them. Emergency remote education, even if partly flawed and sudden, allowed lecturers, teachers and students to end the year and to accomplish all the tasks they were supposed to. Then, after the summer, we had the new term, autumn 2020, the new academic year. It is not an emergency anymore, but unfortunately it has become our new normal. And so universities had to organize their pedagogical offer, taking into account all the precautions and all the characteristics of a place hit by the pandemic. So actually they organized and provided online classes, which are live and recorded, and also live streaming classes, which are attended by a small number of students in person and by a larger number of students usually online. They are live and recorded, so students are offered more possibilities. This way of teaching is similar somehow to blended learning, which is a combination between offline and online learning. But some people refer to it also as a hybrid learning because it is a learning environment in which both on-site and remote students can simultaneously attend lessons and do activities. As I said before, this presentation concentrates on continuous and authentic assessment. By continuous assessment, we mean a series of tests and examinations given to students at various units of a subject taught over a period of time or during a course of study, rather than one test or examination at the end of the term or semester. Here in Italy, at university level, for example, we usually test students at the end of the course, anyway, 3 times a year, through a written test or an oral test, referring to the whole syllabus. By authentic assessment, I mean intellectually interesting and personally meaningful questions, tasks or problems that have value also beyond the classroom. Usually, it happens, at least students ask themselves why a course is meaningful and why tasks are meaningful apart from providing marks. During the emergency, these were issues of concern because lecturers and students had to rethink their attitude towards teaching and learning. And so meaningful questions were asked, and lecturers actually, or at least the lecturers I worked with in the second study, decided that it was the right time to change something, referring to evaluation and assessment, so that students could be provided with something more meaningful. Let's now talk about the main findings. As you can see in the PowerPoint, I used 2 different colors to refer to the outcomes of the 2 different studies. So, as I said before, the light purple slides refer to the emergency remote education outcomes, where I could identify the issues of concern and online assessment as one of them. Whereas the green slides or light blue slides refer to the new normal, that is, on continuous and authentic assessment. As regards assessment in emergency remote education, we can say that only 13% of my respondents did not make any changes about the exam format, whereas the majority of them had to introduce changes, both to the exam format for pedagogical reasons and in order to prevent students from cheating. Let's start with the changes concerning exam format during emergency remote education. So, 39% of my respondents had to simplify the exam. 35% of them had to organize mock tests because students were anxious and didn't feel ready for the new format, and so lecturers decided to help them providing mock tests. Then 17% of them had to change the questions because sometimes they had not been able to cover all the topics of the syllabus, and so they had to change the content, the syllabus, because of the emergency remote education and the exam. Other lecturers opted for continuous assessment. Actually, 17% of them stated that they had used it already before the pandemic, even if maybe not for the whole syllabus, but just to test some small parts in order to have a lighter final exam, a shorter final exam. Whereas 90% of them decided to adopt it because of the pandemic. Anyway, all my respondents reported that the changes they had to perform to the exam format were time-consuming, and so it caused an increased workload. Other major changes concerning the exams were referring to cheating prevention. 22% of my lecturers gave students less time. 17% opted for oral exams instead of written ones to prevent cheating, but it was a burden to them, because maybe they had a lot of students, and so it took lots of hours to finally test everybody. 4% of them used proctoring softwares. In Italy, we had some problems with privacy rules, and these softwares are also expensive. And anyway, lecturers were not free to adopt them, but universities, departments decided to use them. And you see, it's really a small number. 4% of them decided to ask students to keep cameras on or to use their mobile phones to control them so that they could see the student while performing the exam. Again, there were some problems with privacy, because sometimes students were asked to show the surroundings, their desks or the walls of the room, because lecturers were afraid, were worried about possible cheating. But anyway, again, there were problems with privacy. Among the suggestions lecturers made, we can find suggestions referring to pedagogical reasons, which are lecturer friendly. For example, some of them said that they want more closed-ended questions, quicker to assess, to mark. Some of them are student friendly, for example, modifying the syllabus, and some of them refer to continuous assessment. Concerning cheating prevention, some of them suggest oral interviews instead of written exams, no theoretical questions because answers are too easy to find, and more open-ended questions, webcams on in strategic positions. Anyway, this shows that changes are needed. With reference to students' perceptions of assessment during emergency remote education, we can see that there are different issues of concern. I asked them what was difficult getting ready for the exams. And for example, they had problems getting organized. They did not have their books with them. They felt not ready. They had the feeling of wasting their time. They had difficulties reaching out to their lecturers to ask questions and clarifications. And there was a problem they faced because they could not study with their classmates. They felt isolated. Concerning student suggestions about assessment, we can see that they are in favor of mock exams, of exam simplification, and of continuous assessment. And they did say that so they would like their lecturers to pay more attention to the workload. So, concerning assessment in emergency remote education, we can see that we have learned some lessons. First, changes are needed. Probably they were needed also before the emergency, but anyway, now they are compelling. And they refer to the exam format, but also to the type of questions, because students felt that sometimes they had to waste their time getting ready for meaningless tasks, not referring to meaningful issues to them. And now let's talk about continuous and authentic assessment in the new normal. Let's start with doubts and expectations about continuous assessment. On the lecturer's side, I worked with 2 lecturers for this part of the study so far. One of them had already opted for continuous assessment last academic year before the emergency, and she said it proved very useful. The second one opted for continuous assessment this year. Anyway, both of them have adopted continuous assessment just recently, because they felt they lacked training material and they were worried about possible student resistance. Both of them think that the new normal is a good moment to experiment. People are keener on experimenting. And anyway, students can rely on better organization due to recorded classes, and everybody is more familiar with technology. Considering expectations, they feel that continuous assessment can be a useful tool to meet the need for more monitoring. It could help students to develop different skills, and it could provide them with more meaningful tasks. So both of them decided to have six different tasks and giving 5 points to each task to reach a final mark. In Italy, marks at university level are out of 30. So for both of them, we have individual and group evaluation, written tests, just multiple choice or open-ended answers, essays, case analysis, glossary entries, PowerPoint presentations, and translations. Let me remind you that we are talking about English linguistics courses, where also translation is one of the topics. So, according to the lecturers, continuous assessment can help experiment alternative ways of assessing students, makes the experience of distant learning, so not just evaluation, meaningful. It's a way to keep students involved and motivated, provide students with more learning opportunities, and it is a way of diversifying assessment to respect also different needs and different learning strategies and multiple intelligences. So, in the end, according to them, it was a good, positive experience. They had, on average, good outcomes. Some tasks were easier than others, so they feel they had to look more into that for future experience. And they feel that 6 rather different tasks make the overall level of students' preparation and learning eventually emerge. They suggest some best practices. For example, a key element is balancing different types of activity. Leave the right time interval between the tasks, have clear guidelines, provide students with templates, sample answers, shoot short video tutorials to explain how to use specific software. Then, a positive aspect was the user-friendly sign-up method offered by Moodle. Anyway, something very important is to give deadlines. They use also software to deter plagiarism, and they would like to test competence rather than knowledge. So authentic assessment here is very important. Both of them gave students tests with randomized questions, stringent time constraints, but we'll see that neither the lecturers nor the students were happy with this test. So maybe time is ripe to have more continuous assessment and not tests based on knowledge. Let's see now the students' expectations towards continuous assessment. They had a positive attitude. They thought it was a good idea. They were curious and expected positive outcomes. A really small part of the sample got anxious, or an even smaller was scared. Anyway, to me it is very important to see that nobody asked for a traditional exam. It means that students are ready. So, considering the students' perceptions, 66% thought it was easy to keep up the pace. So, a number of students had to face problems with time management and digital skills. In that case, they tried to help each other, and so here we have increased the peer-to-peer tutoring. All in all, it was a positive experience for them because it affected their learning skills in a positive way. They feel now they are better organized and they can deal better with time, and they feel they were more motivated. 88% said it encouraged them to attend and study regularly. And when they are more organized, they feel that they are able to experience self-paced learning, and they feel they increased their self-awareness. Considering the perceptions of the tasks, so the tasks which were chosen helped them to develop new skills, met their different needs, respected their different learning styles, and allowed them to be more creative and involved critical thinking. So these are clues to show that to them traditional tests are not meaningful anymore. And they feel that continuous assessment is useful, challenging, and motivating. And they like group evaluation because they feel it is more inclusive, work-oriented, and sociable. So in conclusion, let's go back to our research questions. So, is traditional assessment still adequate and relevant in the new normal? Actually, change is needed. Maybe changes was needed already before the emergency, but the emergency showed it is now compelling. And continuous assessment could be a better way to test students if compared to traditional assessment, both in emergency remote education and in the new normal, and let me add, under usual circumstances. And considering the second question, can continuous and authentic assessment respond more effectively to the challenges of the new generations of students? Yes, probably it can. But let me say that according to students and lecturers' comments, we need to focus on best practices and to share them in the teaching community. Lecturers need training, specific training, to make the most of it. And of course, further research is needed to identify challenges and issues of concern, and also ways to improve and enhance assessment. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. You can see my mail address if you want to get in touch with me. Let me now give some special thanks to Professor Virginia Pulcini, my supervisor, and to Professor Alessandra Molino, who generously and bravely accepted to experiment with me. And let me thank their students for helping me in this study. Thank you very much.